Yeah, just like how Tom's saying, I'm not sure that there's an ideal pack. Listen, I'm not saying that you have to get ideal, but you can't give me, as Beyond says, you can't piss on me and tell me it's raining. Okay, there's,
Those are facts. Those are facts. Also, real quick, Tom. Just let me know if you're the Tom that just followed me on Instagram of like 10 minutes ago. I believe that's you. But yeah, if you could just confirm. So yeah, so here's my thing about Siakam and just the roster as a whole, right? I look at the players that we have, particularly Siakam, OG, and Scotty Barnes. You guys don't have to be the guys, right? But you have to help us get the guys. That's unfortunately just what we have to expect from the situation because
a bare minimum.
you guys have to help us get like I look at Scotty, right? Cool. Um, you
You
probably
see, they're
don't.
telling
You're
you to get
probably
you gotta get your IG game up or your Threads
Oh, I
game up
do. I
soon.
do. Actually, oddly enough, today I was figuring out how to like format the like the clips from YouTube, how to format them into like real size and TikTok size. But yeah, I'm gonna hit up IG Reels and TikTok and throw the clips all over there. It's coming. It's coming. I'm
Yeah,
growing and expanding my skill set,
Can I
Peter.
can I plug just one thing for a second?
Go
Yeah.
ahead. Go ahead. Go ahead.
I actually talked to Malachi Flynn, like actually,
Okay, Mr.
A-
Source is here.
and yeah, and he said that he's not playing. No, no, but I actually did talk to him, and there is a video that I will be dropping. I think probably next month. It's not necessarily related to this directly, but it is somewhat related because we're talking about player anxiety a little bit and how this front office is crazy. And essentially, he actually talked a little bit about mental health supports and stuff like that. So I'll be
Yeah.
dropping. I'm trying to figure out a way. I have the audio. I'm just trying to figure out how to make it into something. So if I don't think I've actually ever once plugged myself. You've plugged me, so and I appreciate that. But yeah, so if people want to check out Basketball Rewind and sub to my channel, as well as give this channel a like and a sub, that'd be much appreciated. But yeah, sorry, you were saying.
Not just like so. The point I was initially making was I was like, okay, cool. I don't think any of those guys are Kawhi, right? But you could be DeMar, who got us Kawhi.
Mhm.
Like neither of you have to necessarily be what Pascal was in that championship team. But if you
Yeah,
could help be traded, if you could help by getting traded for that guy, that helps too. And the key thing there is that you can't waste them because that is objectively getting nothing. So that's the thing when it comes to these deals. Again, you're talking about Pascal Siakam for Jalen Johnson, AJ Griffin from Atlanta, or Andrew Nemhard and who's the other guy in the backcourt? Aaron Neesmith from Indy. That is
yeah.
basically like that's just giving up in the hope of those guys being traded for the actual guys. So if that's the case, like to kind of reframe losing somebody in free agency, you end up at the same point with both of them in that you failed the objective,
But
right?
even that, wouldn't you want to get a guy who could potentially pop like a Matherin? Because even if he
Yeah.
doesn't, he's closer to being a piece that you could trade for the guy.
Yeah.
You see what
I mean,
like it's like even that it's like either way you're hoping that someone's going to work out either to become a piece or whatever, but you might as well get the guy with the best potential without going to the extreme of getting like below, right?
yeah.
Um Now, and yes, they are solid, but I'm not looking for solid. I'm looking for the next. I'm getting rid of a skill set or trading a skill set, and I'm just responding to GS 400, and I want to get that better in terms of the money. I want to talk about that because GS in your chat he's saying
Yeah.
that
So
yeah. So you
are you going to get to what happened last summer? Because I was just going to mention that so that GS is aware. So
mm,
Pascal Siakam was offered a max contract extension last year. He turned it down, basically betting on the fact that he could get All NBA and be super max eligible, and he did not get that. So with that happening, the assumption is that obviously having turned down the max last year with the aim of getting a super max, he's not going to have dropped off of wanting to be a max player, and he is a max player. So it's not about 40 a year, it's about max, which is a fluctuating number. But yeah, his max deal will be much higher than 40. I worked it through somewhere else.
Mhm.
So
Absolutely.
yeah, it's much higher than 40, and it's what he deserves. We just saw Fred VanVleet get a max deal. It was basically a 2-year deal, but it's a max deal. There's no circumstances in which Fred VanVleet can get a max deal under any circumstances, and Pascal Siakam is not a max player. So it's what he deserves. It's what he will get if it's not from Toronto. And then the other thing I wanted to say was Mudbone. What are you asking about in terms of what's the real issue? What's the real issue between him and the Raptors, or what's the real what's like? I'm just trying to get familiar with what you want to know. Why should other teams risk giving up their assets to get Pascal, knowing that he probably won't sign back with them like he
Well,
said he was
I
gonna do?
yeah, there's a
Sure. Do you
big
want to go ahead?
reason why. Yeah.
Go ahead.
If you get his bird rights, the chances are you are more than likely going to re-sign him, right? Like you have the most negotiating power in terms of leverage. So this is why forget about the supermax, right? For a second, it's just like even signing him to a max, which is very different. And you're talking about the difference between 89 million approximately, I think, just off the top of my head. It's like if he gets the supermax, it's like 289 versus 205 if he lets it go all the way to free agency, or 206, sorry.
Yeah.
At that point, there's a very big difference. This is also the other thing, is that you're gambling, which is probably a fair and smart gamble, that truth be told, unless you're sending him to somewhere that he really doesn't want to be, and I'm not gonna diss markets right now, but there are certain markets that he may not want to be in, then more than likely you're going to be in a place to probably re-sign him and keep him. But you also have to factor in like other things. He is at least been a borderline all NBA player through and through and through at least 3 times thus far, right? Because he was off by 15 votes from being a third team all NBA player this year, which would have been his third in I think 4 years or 5 years, sorry. But point is that I think that Siakam is a good player. I think we lost Alam for a second.
Now I'm here.
Yeah, he's here. I hate this conversation because there's always this whole thing of like every single time, whether it was DeMar, whether it was Siakam now, I Beyond made a good point to me where he pointed out that people used to complain about paying Vince Carter back in the day. And there's always this thing of like, oh my gosh, we have to pay this dude, blah, 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 and all this kind of stuff. And listen, I do agree. I've already said on your live, people can go back to your old videos, give you some more views, is that in terms of the Supermax, I don't think that we should necessarily be looking to pay him the Supermax. I don't think we should be paying a lot of players the Supermax because of the salary cap implications. But with that being said, I do think that if he's worth a max, right, then pay him the max, or when it comes to it, you pay him the max. Because number one, you do have to pay a certain amount of people a certain amount of money each year to even get any sort of tax payments coming back to you. And number two, you don't want to develop a reputation for like not paying dudes, right? And then the third thing is that, sorry, I'm just reading, and that's the issue with contending teams. Well, exactly. That's the problem, is that a lot of as it is right now, a lot of the teams that would normally want to Siakam, they don't really have the assets that you want. And then a lot of the young teams, it just doesn't really match up. So it's kind of a weird situation, which is why we are what we are. But
yeah.
So yeah,
no, to quickly just address a couple things because you kind of lead it into it. Raptors missed a chance to trade him when his value was high last summer. In theory, yes. In practicality, no. We thought we were good last year. We were a 5 seed that we thought we got. We thought we improved. So it was not going to happen under any circumstances. So that's part of the reason why it didn't happen, and that's why like you can't really look at it this way. It doesn't quite make sense given the fact that we thought we were good. And then just because we never quite got to this and it was asked about. So basically, we don't know any real information. We can only speculate. But part of the speculation is that again, Siakam turned down the max extension last year to try to get a super max, and now he's walked that back. He didn't make the super max last year. I don't think he wants to make that bet again. There are different things to think about in that he could obviously suffer an injury that tanks his value. But also the Raptors are probably going to be at best the same next year, maybe slightly better. So given the fact that if you want to be an all NBA player, your team does have to have some type of success. The odds of that happening are pretty small. This isn't a situation where you can make these like big, broad statements like with certainty, but the reality is that it's not a smart bet for him to make that bet that he'll get the Supermax next year. So people are talking about how he wants his money now. He wants that max extension. He's not Supermax eligible right now. He's not making the bet going forward. And that's kind of where the thing with the Raptors are, is that he's telling other teams he doesn't want to extend with other teams. He wants to extend in Toronto. So the issue has to be on Toronto's side. Toronto, for whatever reason, isn't putting that contract on the table. Just because it hasn't happened yet doesn't guarantee it won't still happen. It could still happen. But we're actively talking to other teams about trading him. It's been documented talks with Portland. It's been documented extensively talks with Atlanta. People are bringing up Indy now. I still kind of don't believe it with Indy. But yeah, this is kind of where it is I think Toronto isn't at a situation where it's like Pascal has to go, we have to trade him. Toronto's in a situation where it's like, well, we either extend him or trade him. Let's look at the market and see what the market says. Let's gather information to help make a more informed decision, because you don't want to extend him having not turned every leaf in the trade market to identify whether trading him was the right decision. So that's the situation. It's not that there's necessarily a problem, as we know. There could be, but we just don't know about it. Renting a player for minimum assets to chase a ring also makes sense for certain franchises. It does. I'm just curious as to whether
the merchant franchise either. Like, you don't want to gain that kind of reputation of being like the merchant franchise.
The thing is like possibly, but also I think some teams would just like, they would take the risk just because they feel like they're that close. My only curiosity is like I wonder which franchises look at themselves as a Pascal Siakam away from contending. Like, I wonder how he's seen as a player and how teams look at their own teams and in relation, the two things in relation to each other. Because I don't know, it just doesn't feel like a lot of teams would be like, you know what, guys, Pascal Siakam is what pushes us.
I can give you a couple of teams right now.
Peter brings up Dallas. Who did you have in mind?
Okay, so yeah, okay. There's a couple teams right now, and I'm not even talking about like frameworks for trades. Just if you put Siakam on that team, could they win? First of all, the Suns. Like, without question, because they already have depth issues, and like Siakam would help a lot. I think Golden State is another one, right? Like, you're telling me that his gravity wouldn't help Steph?
I mean, other way around as well. But
that too.
So the thing with both cases, right, is like Pascal Siakam spent a long time of his career effectively being a role player. So that's a role that he would have known more than being the player that he's been the last 2 to 3 years. This was a guy who was, I think, the number 5 guy in a starting lineup with Lowry, DeRozan, DeMar Carroll, and Valanciunas, I think, at the time. Like, he was just a hustle guy in that starting lineup in his rookie year, and then he was a part of a great bench unit in his second year, and then he was a starter on a championship team where he was probably the second option, but still wasn't like a high volume guy. This is a guy that knows how to impact basketball in role player kind of ways while also having the offensive upside to
I'll give you another
function
team
as a number 2 option. But yeah, go ahead.
Okay, if you put Siakam right now, if you swapped him and Sabonis, are the Kings not better? Think about the playoffs and think about where Sabonis struggled.
Yeah. No, he's definitely better, but because also he's gone through his own personal struggles in the playoffs to identify how he has to expand his game to cope with those moments, which Sabonis did, and I don't know if he'll cope with them. But yeah, Siakam has been there, done that, and he's definitely a player that you put him and De'Aaron Fox on a court together, that's a whole lot of dog.
Yeah, but Sabonis
Whole lot of dog.
also never showed any capacity to shoot at that level, at that range either. He was never going to be a mid-range guy, and that was actually always a struggle with him in Indiana. So I don't see him addressing that in a real substantial way. If I mean, I can still keep going, right? Like there's quite a lot of teams. Dallas is another one, as your friend pointed out. There's teams, and that's just the Western Conference. If you put Siakam, they don't have the assets for it, but if you put Siakam on the Celtics, they'd probably be better.
I wonder what the Celtics would trade.
They'd have to trade Brown, which would be an interesting thing. I don't think it would work out as well as people would think, but I know some people would do that trade. But I think Siakam is a much better. Let me ask you this. It's a little bit off topic, and then we'll get back on topic. Has there ever been a team that has won without having at least the ability to thrive in the mid-range, including Golden State?
Oh, I'm with you with that. This is the take that I talked about, I think maybe a couple years ago for the first time. No, you need a mid-range killer on your team, at least one. You need a mid-range killer on the championship team. Part of the reason why I like Phoenix so much is that, like, when shit gets ugly, if you have some guys that can just like pull up and shoot mid-range pull-ups, basically, at an effective rate, you can get yourself out of jams. And like, you know, people always talk about good basketball, right? I think there's so much value in being able to play good basketball and ugly basketball, because like inevitably the good basketball has its runs where it's viable, and then it has its moments where like things just aren't working out for you. So for you to be able to get ugly and still you're decently efficient offensively, that's really important when it comes to winning 16 games in the playoffs. Now, mid-range shots is, I think, like the best ugly basketball in a way, if you have an efficient player, because it's the shot that it's not the shot that the defense is trying to take away, right? If you have a guy that's, you know, head down going to the basket, a team can build a wall in front of the basket. Shout out one of the Van Gundys. Teams are going to chase you off the 3-point line, or at least try to. You can have the mid-range if you want it. If you have the guys that can shoot it, it's effectively unstoppable, because it's in nobody's best interest defensively to stop it. So, yeah, you need the mid-range, and a lot of teams have had mid-range guys.
So your GS said a couple of things. One of them is directed at me. He said, what assets? So my point wasn't that there's a trade to be made. As I said, this is just a thought experiment that if you dropped Siakam on these teams, forget about the trade and all that kind of stuff, but if you magically waved a wand and he was on those teams, would they be better and would they win? And that's my point. And in terms of Sabonis, yes, he is a hub, but he's mainly a hub because he's able to he's a really good screen setter, and he's good in DHOs, handing it off to Fox to allow Fox to go downhill. That's the real secret to their offense, is that they are able to do that within that Princeton offense. In terms of Siakam not being paid, this is the thing that I really want to address, because it's something that a lot of people try to claim. And it's like, they've been saying this about this dude. And I brought up Vince Carter. They did the same thing with Vince Carter before. You got to stop it, because it's like, people were saying when he got this current contract that he wasn't worth it. People said Ben Simmons is worth more. Ben Simmons is on the bench right now. Too afraid to play. Sabonis made more this year. I think that if you look at the numbers, if you look at the advanced metrics as well as the eye test, Siakam was a better player. Sabonis was on a better team, but Siakam was a better player. I can go down the list. I think Kevin Love might have made similar value to Siakam this year. Kevin Love, before he got
financially.
Yeah, this is what I'm saying. I'm talking about financially, right?
Yeah.
And so I think we got to stop pocket watching these dudes, right? Like, you know, at some level, it's like you don't ever get what you deserve. You get what you have the leverage to negotiate. And so I think if you're focusing, it was addressing this thing. I think that Siakam getting paid more than $40 million, because frankly, like, again, people don't recognize that, like, there is a new TV deal coming, okay? Yeah. That is slated to pay us 10 times the amount of money, not to mention the gambling that's coming up, Okay, there's money
And
coming
it's
into
going to
this league.
continue to roll in because only more and more states are going to legalize gambling. And that's a never ending stream. And something to keep in mind, right? In the next CBA, they capped salary cap increases. So it's going to be capped at 10%. But basically,
To
they'll
smooth
roll
it.
over excess into future years to prevent the one time jumps that created like the Timothy Mozgov and Joakim Noah contracts, the Chandler Parsons contracts, right? So the thing is, right, with all this money coming in, you can actually effectively project that in the next 7 to 8 years, maybe even further, you're going to see that 10% jump consistently. And because there's that set figure, you can actually project the salary cap for the next decade and be accurate. Because I have a hard time imagining that it won't cap out at the full 10% jump every single time with all the excess, because there will be certain rushes that cause the excess that has to continue over. So you can effectively project the salary cap going forward. And with those continued jumps, right, you have to keep in mind with max deals, a max deal is a percentage of 1 year's salary cap. So the first year, then 8% increases of that number going forward. So with the cap going up and up and up, right, the value of a max contract becomes less and less as time goes on. So my thing is, right, like, you have to use precedent. There's a pretty strong precedent for players that aren't necessarily like bona fide number one options to get that max number, whatever it is. It happens a lot. So Pascal is worth a max because a team would give him a max, because teams have routinely given players like Pascal maxes, and I would say even players lesser than Pascal have gotten max deals. So that is what he's worth. If you want to make the argument of like what he's worth to a team and then what you value as a max player, that's a separate point, and like very much that's opinion. So like I'm not going to sit here and tell you, you know, don't have your opinion. But yeah, I
Unless
kind
you're
of
going to
disagree.
calculate jersey sales and stuff like that,
Yeah,
and figure
but
out, and that gets complex.
even that, I'm looking at it like he is like I saw what he did last year. I saw him be a viable number 2 in a playoff run, and then get a lot better and basically fail at being a very good number 1. But that's fine, because he's still, I think right now, a very, very, very good number 2, and that's worth a lot of money, and that's worth a lot to a team, because
and it's also very difficult to find. It can be just as hard to find a number 100%. 2 as it is to find number 1. I just really quickly
quick, you can shoehorn a number 1 into number 2 and it doesn't work, because that's not the role that they're used to, and that falls apart a lot. We see that happen. But yeah, go ahead.
So sorry, I just really quickly, I looked up the salary cap numbers, and usually the salary cap has only dropped in general when there has been a disaster like the 2008 financial crisis or COVID, right? So I just wanted to point this out as an example. So in 2008, it was $58 million. It dipped down to $57 million and went back up to 58 and kind of rose kind of slowly from there, about 1% at a time. Even in 2013, it was $58.6 million. If you compare that to now, it's $136 million. Now, this is before the new TV deal comes in, which is going to, again, be 10 times. The cap could raise very easily to $200 million next year. Or at least over the next couple years, for sure. Even with smoothing.
Yes. So actually, I'll pull up the salary cap figures, because Spotrac has that calculated for the next few years. So like I randomly had Indiana's cap situation pulled up. So I'll share the screen on that once I get to the numbers. Where are we at? All right.
Yeah, like don't be surprised if Scotty Barnes on his next contract makes $50 million. That's why I'm saying, like, you know, like we can't be saying like this dude is worth this or this dude is worth that.
So here it is, people. I'll try to zoom in as best I can while having the relevant information on the screen. Okay, so basically, important thing. This figure in bold is the cap number, and then this figure in bold here, and the second thing is the tax figure, right? And then they have it calculated for these years. So let me see if that's visible. It could be more visible, so I'll zoom in more. Okay,
that's good.
So you see the cap going up to 207 by 2028, and it's only going to continue to go beyond that.
And that's just approximations before they actually signed the TV deal. right? And the gambling and all that kind of stuff. So sorry I interrupted you earlier, but it's
No,
just I think it's an important
so
point.
you know what I think what this is though is that if you notice there's a beginning at 2024, 25, there's a 10% jump going forward. So like 10% of 142 is like rough 14.2. So then you see that added, that's how they arrived at this number. And then they got 10% of this, that's how they arrived here. So this is approximating the 10% jumps as soon as those rules kick in. So this is the thing, as long as that excess of income does happen, these will be the numbers, right? And then this 10% of this will go up to that next figure. And like, again, unless I think there's a major jump prior, so
Well,
unless this figure shoots up, this will be what it is.
so usually what they do is they calculate it based on that, and then they reconfigure it based on how the revenue goes. So that's why I'm saying like this is a safe guess, a very safe
Yeah.
guess. But
Yeah.
like it could easily, for example, instead of being next year 142, if revenue continues to rise, because like people were freaking out, they're like, oh, basketball is down because people were, not realize it's COVID, and then people just got sick of things. It could easily go 148, for example.
Yeah, it could
Right?
be 148. And then the trickle down of the 10% increases from that point will continue and these numbers will all be higher. So I do remember that that's how it worked up to this point, but I'm just assuming that with the 10% cap happening going forward, they'll do the same configuration, but I just think they'll always end up at the 10% jump because so much money is going to be entering sports as a whole, but specifically basketball. So you can look at these things, and actually for some of my videos I'll be doing in the future about like looking at long-term salary stuff, it's pretty helpful to get like to just know that the cap can only go up so much, and you can look at the actual numbers and you can get a pretty good assessment of how things are going to go. Just real quick, also Mudbone, out of curiosity, you're a Rockets fan, right? I think you mentioned that during the Fred VanVleet live stream thing that I did earlier. But yeah, I wanted to ask that because obviously you're in here, Peter's in here, we've seen Jez in here, a bunch of people that I know from Sarcasm City, and then even just the occasional random fan that pulls up. There was was named Joe Wayne in an earlier stream, and then another Lakers fan. So all the people here that aren't Raptors fans, I will be doing streams that are basketball wide streams at some point. So make sure you guys are tuned in for that. That will be happening at some point. I don't know exactly how I'm going to do it. It'll probably be its own recurring show, and people will be here depending on what the topics are, depending on the relevant teams that we talked about that week. But I will have larger basketball wide content on this show. Like just organically, I found a lot of fans of other teams have turned up here. I found a Pacers fan that's down to talk about the Pacers. So whatever team comes up, we'll have somebody to talk about things with. I'm looking for a Hawks fan if that trade inevitably happens for Pascal. But yeah, NBA wide content will be coming to the channel. FIBA World Cup content will be happening towards the end of August. So lots of different things will be here. So if you're not necessarily a Raptors fan, make sure you're subscribing to the channel. Make sure you're liking the videos, because I will be here giving you content that's relevant to you at some point. Kenyon, we talked to a lot. I'm fairly happy wrapping up soon. If you have anything left to say, you can get that off your chest. But yeah.
No. Thank you for having me, and that's actually it. I'll actually head out early, but yeah, I think it was a good chat as always, and enjoy the rest of your stream, man.
100%, 100%. Thank you for being here. That's all for me as well. We've been here for 2 hours. I'll chop this stream up into smaller videos and put that out on the YouTube for the people that may have missed this and only want to tune into different segments. A lot of people joined at different points of the stream in the middle. So make sure if you missed some of the stuff at the beginning, you go back and check it out. It was an awesome stream. We talked about a lot of things, and I'll be live again tomorrow potentially, but if not, Wednesday or Thursday for sure. If you're subscribed to the channel, you won't miss it. And yeah, I'll see you guys around. Thanks for all the support. If you like this video, it's a clip from a longer live stream, which is the main way I do content at Toronto Hoop Talk. Live streams are an awesome way to keep people involved as I'm making the content. I love hearing from you guys as I'm speaking on issues. So if you like this video, make sure you check out the full live stream at Toronto Hoop Talk, and make sure you sub to the channel so that you see when I go live.